Just after 3:10. Good afternoon, I'm Andy Martindale. Now, each year, thousands of victims are trafficked into the UK working for little or no pay. And modern-day slaves could be working anywhere. They could be in car washes, building sites, nail salons, or even farms. And these people are abused and exploited, and each year it's happening more. There were over 75 incidents reported in West Mercia last year, and there's a new book that hears from one of the many victims of human trafficking, and it's looking at the front line of those who help the victims, including the police, the charities involved with support and recovery. Stolen Lives, Human Trafficking and Slavery in Britain Today is out now. It's a new book written by Louise Hulland, who I spoke to earlier, and I asked her what's the definition of modern day slavery.
That is a really good question, and actually considering all the interviews that I've done over the last week or so, you're the only person that's actually asked me that. It basically means to be held against your will and to be exploited in the ways that the likes of you and me, Andy, just can't imagine. Usually it happens when somebody's been trafficked or moved from one place to another through deception or through coercion. So, for example, the young lady that I follow in my book, Elena, she was a university student in Albania, and she thought she'd fallen in love with a young man. He took her to Belgium to meet his family, and she went with him very naively. And when she got to Belgium, lo and behold, this family did not exist, and she found herself trapped in a brothel. So that would be the example of trafficking through deception, because she thought she was going somewhere for one reason, and it turned out to be quite the other. Traffickers are really clever, and I use that word really, really loosely. They're very good at finding things to hold over people. They're really good at finding vulnerable people's vulnerabilities, and scaring them. So basically, so much of their control is about coercive control and coercion. So, for example, telling somebody that if they don't do what they want them to do, then their families are in danger. They know where their families live. So what we think of when we think of the history books and slavery in the history books, we think of shackles and chains, whereas now being in slavery actually probably doesn't mean any form of physical restraint. It's emotional restraint and emotional abuse that makes victims too scared to tell anybody about the circumstances in which they're living and being exploited.
Can you remember the point where you felt so passionately that you needed to write about it and explore it? Can you remember a particular point in your life where you saw modern day slavery?
I got interested in the subject area from an academic point of view and a theoretical point of view about organised crime in about 2010 in the run up to the London Olympics, because I was doing kind of a few sort of basic investigations around, would East London become a hotspot of trafficking due to the Olympics? Because often where there is big business, there's big crime. And then a couple of years ago, I actually met a survivor of trafficking, Elena, who's in the book, and it was literally meeting her, because it's all very well having the statistics, knowing the theory of organised crime, knowing everything about trafficking and modern day slavery as a concept. But then the minute you meet a survivor and you look into their eyes and you hear their story, a little part of you just shifts from meeting her and hearing what she went through, and then witnessing what she went through here in the UK. It changed everything for me. And I think what's really interesting is there are so many people in the book, experts, sort of, as you say, people working on the front line, that have had similar experiences. I've spoken to police officers who were working in different areas of the police force. They got put into the trafficking and modern slavery unit maybe after working in various other areas. And it's kind of addictive, the urge to stop this crime. And one of the lawyers I spoke to said basically this is like murder, but without taking somebody's breath. You take every part of their life apart from their breath. And there is something so abhorrent about this particular crime that I think when you see that somebody's been through it, you just can't quite believe that they're still standing. And it was really quite a visceral response that I had to meeting this young lady.
And when you sat down with that blank page before you started writing this book, did you have an idea of what you wanted to achieve from writing it?
I think the main point was that I wanted to give Elena and I wanted to give the other survivors in the book their voice, because they'd been stripped of everything. The practicalities like passports and papers, and the big emotional things like being able to see their families and their freedoms. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine what they've gone through. So the fact that they then had suffered this horrendous crime, and then when they come out the other side, they have to relive it time and time again to the authorities to get the support that they need. They have to go through quite a lot of red tape to be believed. And if they are believed, they get the support that they need. And many people question whether that's enough. So they've been through so much. I really wanted them to be able to have their stories told and be able to have their voice back. And then, so that was really important to me, to give them that spotlight. And then the more I sort of worked in this area, the more I realised that actually just by telling people that this crime is on your doorstep, could be anywhere, I felt like I was kind of doing my bit to say, look, it's here, this is what survivors have been through, and this is where current victims could be. So it's kind of about empowering people to know that this is a crime that's happening in Britain in the 21st century, and actually we can do something about it.
And you say that these crimes can be happening anywhere. People listening in Shropshire might think, oh, well, surely, human trafficking and modern-day slavery only happens in big cities like London and Birmingham and Manchester. Yeah. Couldn't possibly happen in parts of rural Shropshire, but it can.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that many people think, is that it is associated with big cities, but the extent to which one human can abuse another really never fails to shock me now. And one of the things is that actually there are so many ways in which people have been enslaved in rural areas as well as big urban cities. So, for example, there's one really famous case in the West Midlands that wasn't actually centred around Birmingham. It was centred around Walsall and some little towns around there. A really famous case was in Wales, where one man went missing, and he was a slave for 13 years on a farm just outside Newport. There are so many ways in which people can be exploited, whether it's on car washes or whether it's in agriculture. And we have to keep our eyes open really everywhere, because these traffickers are clever and they will find any way that they can to exploit another human being.
So these victims are hidden in plain sight in a way then. So how can we tell if someone is being forced to work for little money and being made to work against their will?
Well, this is a really good question, and there are so many really good resources out there. So like the Modern Slavery Helpline, and if you go on their website, they have everything laid out, and they also have an app, which means that you can get in touch with them if you have any concerns. So I think the first thing I'd say before I go sort of down the list of things to watch out for is, if you have concerns and you report it and you're wrong, it doesn't matter. It's not down to you to be right. It is down to you to pass on the information and let the people who are experts find out if you're right or not. There is nothing for you to lose if you do that. There'll be no sort of comeback on you if you made a mistake. If you're correct, then you could be potentially giving someone their freedom back. So never be afraid to report it. It's not down to you to be accurate. It's down to you to voice your suspicions. Some of the many things that are really helpful that I've always found is when you're interacting with people in some of the sort of the obvious suspects. So sort of maybe the cheaper cash only nail bars, the very cheap cash only car washes, is, can you engage with the people that you're talking to? Are they happy to chit-chat away over a cup of tea if you're getting your nails done? Are they happy to make small talk whilst they're washing your car? Or are they head down, cowed, maybe very aware of people walking around who are in charge of them? Where does the money go at the end of the transaction? Are you handing it over to them and they pocket it, or are they giving it to somebody else and getting some money back from them? Also, as well, when you're thinking about it, it's not just in the car washes and nail bars, because that could really make us miss out on spotting things elsewhere. For example, domestic servitude is a crime that is very much here in the UK as well. When people have a live-in help, are they being well cared for with holidays and good pay? Are they out and about living their own life, or are they trapped in the house literally as a slave? These are really good signs. It's the interactions with people and the cost. Let's think about the logistics. How many people are washing your car and how much are you paying? Does that work out that someone's on a fair wage, or does the maths not quite add up there?
And my final question, I think, is about Elena, who you did focus on in that book. Two questions, really. Number one, how is she now? And also, has she read your book, and what does she make of it?
So Elena is doing okay. I would hate to say that, oh yeah, she's brilliant, because that would be unrealistic. She has a lot of inner strength. She's come through a lot. She tries very hard to be positive for the sake of her and her child. And there is no question that for survivors of trafficking and slavery, there are very deep wounds that take time to heal. So she can see a future. She is feeling more positive about that. There's no question that lockdown has had an effect on her and other survivors. And with regards to the book, I put it together with so many conversations that I had when we first met, and then when we caught up afterwards, because obviously there's a big process through the book where we were focusing very much on her life, and afterwards we sort of retold all of it retrospectively. So I ensured that everything that I wrote about her was translated into her native tongue by a very amazing translator. So Elena had it read to her in her native Albanian to make sure that she was happy that everything was accurate, that she knew what I was saying about her experience, to make sure that I wasn't revealing anything that could in any way identify her and herself now. And I have to say, I'm going to get a bit emotional now, actually. I have to say, when the final part was read to her, she had tears running down her face and I had tears running down my face. So it was quite a thing to do, really. It was quite a privilege and quite very much responsibility to tell her story, because she was incredibly brave to do that with me, and I'm eternally grateful to her for doing that.
Louise, thank you so much. We'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's Louise Hulland, who has written the book Stolen Lives, Human Trafficking and Slavery in Britain Today. And I think it might be worth mentioning the National Modern Slavery Helpline. If you believe someone could be a victim, it's 08000 121 700.